Richard Anderson is 91 years old, and when people ask him the secret to a happy life, he always says the same strange thing. He says he only made one good decision in his entire life. Just one. And he made it on a Tuesday morning when he was 40 years old, sitting alone in his old pickup truck outside his house in rural Ohio, with his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He will not tell most people what that decision was, not right away. He likes to let them wonder first. These days, Richard lives in a small countryside home outside a quiet Ohio town, the same kind of house he once would have built for someone else. He still wakes before sunrise out of habit, makes 1 cup of black coffee, and sits on the wooden porch in a light blue flannel shirt and brown suspenders, watching the fog lift off the garden. His hands are rough from 60 years of carpentry, his silver hair is thin and short, and his blue eyes still catch the morning light the way they did in every photograph his children have ever taken of him. Neighbors say he is the kind of man who remembers everyone's name, asks about their mother, and never seems to be in a hurry to be anywhere else. What Richard will tell you is what his life looked like before that morning. He grew up the son of a carpenter, in a house where nobody said the words, "I love you," out loud, and nobody felt they had to, because that simply was not how things were done. He learned early that a man showed love by working hard and keeping quiet about his feelings. So that is what Richard did. He worked, he built porches, barns, kitchen cabinets, whatever anyone needed. By the time he was 30, he had a wife named Margaret, 2 small children, and more work than he could handle, and that felt, to him, like success. It did not feel that way to Margaret. She told him once that she felt like she was raising their children alone, in a house with a man who simply happened to come home every night. He did not understand what she meant. He was right there. He paid the bills. He never raised a hand to anyone, never raised his voice much either. Was not that enough? It was not. By the time Richard turned 40, Margaret had quietly stopped asking him to come to dinner on time. She had stopped waiting up. Somewhere inside herself, without ever raising her voice or asking for a divorce, she had slowly begun to give up. Richard did not see it happening. He says now that the most dangerous kind of ending in a marriage is rarely the loud kind. It is the quiet kind, where someone simply stops trying, and you do not notice until it is almost too late. He almost did not notice in time. It was a Tuesday morning, the one he always mentions, and that morning, before he left for work, Margaret handed him a small folded piece of paper. She told him to read it later, in the truck, not in front of her. He sat in the driveway and unfolded it. There were only 6 sentences on it. He has never repeated the exact words, even now, 51 years later. He only says it was, in his words, the kindest way a person had ever told him she was leaving. She was not leaving that day. But she was telling him the truth. That she loved him. That she was tired. That she did not know how many more years she could spend beside a man who never told her what he was thinking, and that something had to change soon, or she would have to choose her own peace over their marriage. Richard sat in that truck for almost 40 minutes. He did not go to work. He says he does not remember deciding anything in some grand, dramatic way. There was no lightning bolt. He just remembers one small thought arriving, quiet and certain. If I do not say something today, I might lose everything, and I will have deserved it. So he made his one decision. That night, instead of falling asleep in silence the way he had for years, Richard wrote Margaret a short note. Just a few lines on a torn scrap of paper left on her side of the bed. It was not poetry, it was barely well written at all. It simply named one true thing he was grateful for about her that day. He decided he would do that every single night, for the rest of his life, no matter what. He did not announce it. He did not make a speech about changing. He simply did it that night, and the next, and the next. Some nights the notes were 3 sentences long. During the hardest years, some were only 1 sentence, scrawled at midnight after a 12-hour day on a job site. But there was always a note. Margaret did not say a word about it for nearly 2 weeks. Then one morning she finally asked him why. Richard told her the truth, that he was afraid of losing her, and that he did not know how to say things out loud, so he had decided to write them down instead, every night, for as long as he lived. That was the whole decision. 1 note, every night, forever. What happened across the next 50 years is the part Richard struggles to explain, because he insists it was not dramatic. Nothing exploded into place. Nothing suddenly became perfect. They still argued about money. They still disagreed about raising their children. He still worked too many hours for a few more years before he finally learned to leave the job site behind at 5 o'clock. But somewhere in the middle of all those small, unremarkable nights, something shifted. Margaret started leaving notes back. Their children, without ever being taught to, grew up believing this was simply what marriage looked like. Two people who put something true on paper for each other every night, even after a bad day, even after a fight. Richard's daughter says she did not realize until she was an adult that most houses did not have a drawer slowly filling with folded notes. There were hard years. A year Margaret nearly lost a pregnancy. A year Richard's small carpentry business almost failed completely. A year their oldest son stopped speaking to them for nearly 8 months over a decision they could not agree on. Through every one of those years, the notes never stopped. Richard says some of the most important ones were written on the worst nights of his life, when he had nothing comforting to say at all, and so he wrote that down too, that he had no answers tonight, but he was still there, and he still loved her. He kept every note Margaret ever wrote back to him. She kept every one of his. Somewhere in their small countryside home, there are 2 old wooden boxes, worn soft and pale at the corners, holding more than 18,000 notes between them. Richard is 91 now, Margaret is 89. They have been married 51 years since that Tuesday morning in the truck. A few months ago, his granddaughter came to him in tears, moving through a hard season in her own young marriage, and asked him what the real secret was, because she had grown up watching her grandparents and never once doubted that they loved each other. Richard told her what he tells everyone now, slow and careful. He told her that love is not one enormous decision made once, at a wedding altar. It is thousands of small decisions, repeated, on the nights a person does not feel like making them. He told her the marriage did not survive because he and Margaret never struggled. It survived because they decided, every single night for more than 50 years, to put something true into words, instead of letting silence decide things for them. Last night, Richard wrote note number 18,641. It is sitting right now, folded once, on Margaret's pillow, waiting for her to find it before she falls asleep. He says he has no idea how many more he has left to write. But he plans to write one tonight too.